Good evening. This evening I want to quickly cover a question that's come up in COS 1512 2022 assignment 3 question 1, and this question refers to converting a struct to a class. So without further ado, let's go and read the question and then then actually go through it. So here you can see it's COS 1512 assignment 3 2022, and it says consider the following structure used to keep an address. So it has struct address, and then it says string is street name, integer is street number, string city, string postal code. Turn the address record into a class type rather than a structure type. The address record class should have private member variables for all the data. Include public member functions for each of the following. They want a default constructor that initializes the street name and the city to a blank string, the street number to 0, and the postal code to a string of 4 zeros. The member functions to set each of the member variables to a value given as an argument in the function, and they call these mutators. Okay, and member functions to retrieve the data from each of the member variables. These are called accessors. Okay, so when I look at this, for me the default constructor is a standard initialization of the class. The set members are basically when you set something, and the retrieve are called getters. So these are getters and these are setters, and so that's how I remembered it when I was writing exams and learning this module. Use this class in a program which prints an address. The program should input a value for each of the member variables and then print an address consisting of the values for the member variables in proper address format. Use the keyboard to supply input and display the output on the screen. Test your program with the following input. So it has a street name, a street number, a city, and a postal code. Okay, so obviously the first thing you do is you open up your code blocks. Okay, I'm going to click on File and go to New, and I'm going to say I want to create an empty file. Okay, or let me actually, I don't want to do that. I want to go to File, New, and I'll say File here, and then what I do over here is I'll say a C++ source file. Click on Go, click on Next. I want it to be a C++ one. Click on Next. Now here it goes into full path details, so you can click on this triple dots and it'll open up your browser. I'm going to do this and take you back to the screen once I'm there. So as you can see, I'm in my COS 1512 folder. I want to actually create a new folder here, and I want to call this question 1 so that I can split my files into their individual questions. And then I'm going to create a new one here and say question1.cpp, just like that. Go save, and so this is the path that I've chosen. Okay, I'm going to just create one file, so I'm just going to go finish like that, and then on this file, when I have a look at what it's got, I'll get my screen set up. Okay, my screen is now set up the way I want it. You can see I've got struct address, and we're starting off with a string. So with a string, we need to remember that we always have to have an include, and since this will always be an input output, what I normally do is I just put a comment over here and I say this is assignment 3 question 1. Okay, and I'm going to obviously use my includes. So the first include I'm going to add here is IO stream for input output stream. Okay, so I'll just say that, close that. I want to make it a little bit bigger so you guys can see, and then again I want to include another include, which is the string, since I'm going to start using a string. And then obviously with most of the code blocks we always use using namespace standard. Okay, namespace and standard. Alright, so that should help us quite a bit. And now we want to convert our struct to a class. So the way we do that is we change the wording of struct and we say class, and then we put the name of our class, which is address. Okay, and then now we want to start defining our variables of address. Okay, I don't know why it's added of, we just want address. Okay, I'm going to move this part onto another line, and then from here we basically specify what we're going to use. So in C++, when you creating these variables, you've got to remember we can always start off with a private, and so let's just define what we've been given. So we're going to use private over here, and we're going to say, okay, we've got these variables. They said here, turn the address records into a class type and make sure that the class should have private member variables. So all of these are going to be member variables. So we're going to have private, and then we're going to have a string, and we're going to call it street name. Okay, so I would actually just copy it directly from here. I would just copy this, because that's basically what you do. Oops, don't know why it's shortened it out, but let's just do it. Let's see if it happy. There, like that. And I'm just going to, because I want everything in line, I'm going to just make sure it appears in line. So now we have our data members. Okay, and then as they say, they want us to create destruct constructors, member functions, and yeah, the set member functions and the get member functions. So you have to, in the class, you have to make that public. So we're going to first type in our word public. Okay, and the first one that they wanted was a default constructor, which is going to be our address. So I'm just going to define it as address, like that. Okay, and then the next ones would be our setters. So the first setter is going to be a void, and we're going to say set the street name. Okay, street name, and as you know, the street name is going to have a string of street name. So I'm just going to copy that from there and fill that in over there, and we mustn't forget to add our semicolons at the end. So now we've got our set street name. The next one we're going to create is another void, and we're going to set it to the set street number, because when we were having a look over here, you've got street name and you've got street number, and so we're doing it in that sort of order. So you can choose whatever you want the function name to be, and as you can see, we want it to be an int over here, and because we've got an s already, we can't use an s again, so we're just going to use another letter. So I'm just going to use n for this one. Okay, and then we're going to do that for our city and our postal code. So we're going to say void, and we're going to say set, and we want to set our city, and we're going to call that string and c. since we're already using that, and then a void, and we're going to say set our postal code, and here we've got a string, and we can use P for postal code. Alright, now so this address is our default constructor. Okay, so I'm going to call that default constructor, and then these are our setters, or our mutators as they call it. Yeah, so I'm going to call it setters or mutators. Okay, and so that would be for all of these. Then the next one that we want is accessors, which are all get functions, and so that one is the first. What happens there is we use the returning value, so we're going to say string, and then we want to get our street name. Okay, and with getters, because we don't want anything to change, we always add a const on the end, which means that it won't allow any changes to be made. Okay, so now we've got our int and our street number, so we're going to say get stnr. Okay, and as I say, it's a getter, so we want to make sure it's can't change. Then the other two are string over here, and we want our city, so we'll say get city, and we'll make that a const, and then another one of string, and we want that to be get our postcode, and we want that to be our const. Alright, so now basically this is what we would normally put as our header. Okay, so I'm going to put this as getters, and we're going to call this accessors. Accessors, right? So now we've got our header. This information would normally be written in a separate file, in a header file. And then what we would do is we would have an implementation file, and so I'm going to just label it as implementation because I'm creating one big file. And on our implementation, when it comes to classes, you'll see here's an address here, and then we want our default constructor address. So the way that you define the implementation file is you always refer to the actual class, so that's why you'll always find there's these symbols before any of these member functions. And so because we're wanting to implement our default constructor, we can use this, and so I'm going to call this our default constructor, default constructor. Okay, and then obviously we got to put our information inside of the brackets, and so we basically can copy these variables that we've got, and or what do they call them, member no, they are member variables, yeah, private member variables. Okay, so we're going to say street name, and according to this thing it said that we'll load it as empty, initialize the street name and the city to a blank string, and so this is the way that we represent a blank string. Okay, then the next one is our street number, so we're going there, and they said our street number should be initialized to a 0. See there, street number to a 0. Okay, and then we've got our city, and that we're going to initialize to a blank. Okay, and then finally we've got our postal code, and that they said we must initialize to 4 zeros. So because of the 4 zeros, we're going to put them in inverted commas like that, just because you won't get it to it's a string in it, that's how you would have to initialize a string, okay, with the 4 zeros. So now the next thing that we want is our setters, our mutators. So I'm going to put that over here, and then we start with our first one. So as I say, we copy this address part because we're referring to the address class, and then the next thing is we go and copy this here, and we can use that as there, and then we have to define what we want it to do. And so because this is setting a street name, we want to say our street name value over here is going to be set by the string that's being passed. So we're saying our S over here, okay, and then the same, we just copy all of these setters. So I'm just going to go and do that. I forgot to add the void over here, but that's what we have to do, void, and basically that's all we're doing, is we're just adding the class detail over here. And like I say, we go on to the next line, and then we say what is our next variable, and we've got street number, and we're wanting to set that to n, which is being passed in here. Okay, then the next one is the set city. Okay, and we want to make sure it's part of our class over there, and then we implement that, and that one is city equals C, and then finally we've got this, and we're going to postal code. Alright, so that's all our setters done. So the next ones we want to do is our getters. So I'm going to just copy that, and I'm going to paste that up here, and then I want to copy and paste these. Okay, and we've got our class over here, and that is now all that we're doing is basically returning our values. So we just say return, and then we return whatever our private data member, what we're wanting to return to. So that's going to be this one, since that's get street name, and we add our semicolon on the end, and yeah, that will be what we have to do for all of these. So I'm going to just copy these down, even though they've got the semicolons. I'm going to just delete them out. I'm going to obviously do that. I want to do this, and I want to return. because that's what we're going to basically do for all of them. String there, there, copy this to there, we can do that one there like that, and we just want to return. And now we're going to get street number, so we can even just copy from here. Turn, don't forget the semicolon, and then we want city next. Turn our city, and we want our postal code. Okay, and so that would be our full implementation file. And so the next thing that we need to do is create a main, and that main will have all our snippets of code in it. So I'm just going to call this our main application, and from here we're going to go int main. And as you know, int main always has open and close brackets like that. So now we're going to define a new address. We're going to say address, and I'm going to say my address. Okay, and then from here we're going to create exactly the same type of things as we have here, but we're going to give them different names. Because they are outside of the class. So if you see here, this is street name, so I'm going to change that to S name, and then this is street number, so I'm going to change that to S number, and then this is city, so I'm going to just change this to C city like that. Okay. And then postal code, I'm going to change to P code like that. Okay, so they're unique variables, and they can only be used within this main function. They're not able to be used by the class, and so we're going to use our getters and setters in order to change values and set values and return values. Okay. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to ask the user to please enter address. So we're using the cout command, which is console output, and we're saying please enter your address. Okay, and then to make it all pretty, we use our getters here. So we're going to say cout, and we're going to say my address, and we're saying dot get, and the first thing we want is get our street number. Okay, get our street number, and then we'll add a space in between, and then we'll ask for our street name. Get our street name. Okay, like that, and then we'll have our end line. Okay, and then our output will be for our city. Dot get our city. Okay, and that we'll also want an end of line, and then finally we'll get our postal code. Get our postal code. End the line, and because this is a console application, we have to use return 0 so that it will remember to exit our code. And then that is the full command, okay, the full set of code. So now if I execute it, it might just take a little bit of a while because I have an antivirus program, but anyway, here I see it's here. So let's go and see what they've asked us to enter. So it first asks us our street name, so let's go ahead and enter it. It might restart. I see the antivirus is kicking in. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. That is it. Here we go. Let me go and do that again. Go to street. Okay, the street number is 543. The city is Mukilnuk, and the postal code is 0002. And there you have it. My address is 543 Prela Street, Mukilnuk, 0002. Thank you for watching. I hope this video has been helpful and informative, and all the best with COS 1512. Thanks and goodbye.